evening, everybody. It's Valerie Ling here, clinical psychologist, and of course, my direction of revitalization, which is essentially my way of saying, trying to figure out how to do life without burning out. I've actually set up my studio today, so I'm kind of trialing it a little bit today just to see how it works, but at the same time, just to bring you some content as well. If you stay till the end of this video, you'll get to hear some new directions I'm taking with regards to my work, having come to a point of clarity. But for today, I actually wanted to just talk with you about the misconceptions that I seem to hear when I'm talking about staying vital or staying, I don't really like the word balanced, but staying on point, if you like, whether you're a health professional, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are whether you're somebody who is doing some high energy work or caring for people, what it means actually to stay afloat and not burn out. And it occurred to me that because there is so much talk at the moment about what burnout is, we might be at the vomit factor or the rolling your eyes factor or the just get on with it factor. And I want to just bring, I think, a lens of looking at it so that it doesn't just go blasé and just go to the back of everybody's minds, because the eloquence, if you like, of burnout prevention work is that there are just some key principles you just need to wrap your head around. And once you wrap your head around that, it kind of gets easy to figure out what that framework is. So I'm just going to, because this is part of my setup, I'm going to also share this into some other spaces. Would have helped if, okay. And you never know who might actually jump live with me. Just give me 2 seconds and I will most certainly be with you. Okay, so the first thing to say is, if you want to understand burnout, it really is about an energy model. At the end of the day, resourcing ourselves so that we stay afloat is an energy model. It doesn't mean that we float through life without hard times. It doesn't mean that we come to the world looking like nothing ruffles our feathers. Of course, we're going to lose our temper. Of course, we're going to have life situations that just run us, like, oh my goodness, I didn't see that coming. Of course, we're going to have days where we don't feel our best. We don't feel motivated. We don't feel like we're in the best mindset. There are going to be days when we're tired. Hey, Kim, I think you caught me before when I was trying to set up. You're going to find that there are days when you're tired. You see, I think that one common misconception about this burnout work is that being super whatever, whether it's superhuman or a super worker or a super therapist, and I need to see, this is really good that I'm testing this. I'm going to flip my screen. Does that do it? Awesome. There we go. Okay, let me flip that. Oops. I might actually have to, there we go. Right. So that we're super. And I think the other thing that comes up for me in the space that I work is that because there's this idea that to be burnout proof means that we have to be super whatever, that there is this thinking then that I feel a sense of shame, a sense that what I did, what I'm doing is actually not enough. This is a very beta, okay. And again, that is a common misconception. And I think the other seems to be all about the letter S, is that there's a common misconception that all I need to do is to add some self-care and I should be right. And then there's a little bit of, I think, impossible or sometimes guilt thinking that, oh, if only if it was that easy, I don't have time to do that. And maybe I'll throw in one more S. Another misconception is that it means we have to stop. It means that we actually have to stop doing what we're doing, and if we have a holiday or if we recharge, then we should be fine. Now, I want to say that revitalization work or staying vital, it's got very little to do with, oh, here's another S, if I could squeeze it in, these static factors. Okay, these static factors. That is not what it's about. Rather, let me try to present this to you in a framework that helps us to think about burnout from a more realistic and a practical point of view. So, of late, it seems to be that I like cars at the moment. I don't know how that came to be. I think cars used to be something that I used to just have as a functional thing. You know, you just sort of get into a car and it gets you from point A to point B. But I think recently, as I've begun to look at how to streamline my processes, remain productive, and make the best use of my time, my car's become like another office space for me. And so the things that make me feel more efficient in my car have become important. And I think burnout prevention work is a lot like having a car, in that when you're in your vehicle, you've got to keep a gauge on all the different indicators, right? So whether you've got fuel, where the water is, where the oil levels are, having it regularly serviced, the tire pressure, and ensuring that it can go the distance. And if you don't take good care of your car and you're not keeping your eye on all of the different resources that it has, not only might you stop halfway, but the car might fall apart. Now, let's take that a little bit further and say, when you're actually driving a car, you want to be driving the car, right? You need to have a sense of direction of where you're going. You need a navigation system. You don't want to be lost. If you're sitting in a great car and you're just going around and around and around in circles, you're going to lose your motivation and your sense of direction. And eventually the car's going to wear out doing what? Not much, just going around and around. And let's push that a little further and say you're going around and around and around in your car. You're not quite sure where you're going. Sometimes you go left, sometimes you go right, sometimes you're going at 100, sometimes you're going at 60, and you're kind of guessing it around. And after a while, the car stops moving and you're fatigued. And so you get a couple of people to start pushing, right? And they're pushing. And, we're all trying to move the thing uphill. Now the car needs to go where? Not quite sure. Just everybody get out now and push and push and push. That's kind of the picture of what it's like to be burnt out. Not just for the car, but for the driver and for the people around us, our family, our colleagues, the people that we're trying to help. We're all trying to push this thing uphill, but we're not quite sure where we're going. So burnout, I think the best way to understand it is about energy and resources. And very often, this is meant to be a battery, plus, negative. We have a view of doing the things that we do where the battery source is just us, right? And this is where my self-care and resilience lens, I say, is limited, right? So the battery is just us. So if we eat, if we sleep, if we exercise, if we make sure that our resilience and problem-solving skills are tanked up, if we make sure that we're healthy and all of that, right? Then we can output. So the battery becomes just us. Now the thing about that is that battery life is finite at the end of the day. you will eventually drain those things, because as you do more and more complicated things, or your work structures get complicated, or your caring structures get complicated, there is only a finite amount of personal battery life and energy that can sustain what you do. Instead, think about it this way. Much like your car, it's not just the battery that is going to keep that car going. There are different resources, right, that actually is the battery for what you're doing, right? And those different resources are going to be things like your personal resources, your meaning and purpose resources, as well as your work resources. Okay? That's what is contributing to battery life. And each of these factors, so this could be things like your sleep, your eating, personal hygiene type things, your exercise, your mindset, your health, etc. Each of these things has an indicator, right? Just like your car does, as to whether it's full, empty, where that indicator is. Similarly, your meaning center, in other words, why you do what you do, and how to know when to persevere, how to know when to pull back, a bit of the navigational system as well, also has got some different components. Oops, out of frame. Okay. So it's going to have some different things as well. You want to discern your purpose, and that can be more clarified or less clarified as you're going. Hey Larissa, I can see the comments. Feel free to shoot me some questions or comments, because I'm not in a hurry tonight. And so part of that meaning work is discerning your purpose, why you're doing what you're doing. Part of it is actually figuring out that creative and reflective space that you have for yourself, right? So do you have time to, once you know what you're doing, figure out how you're going to do it in ways that aren't gridlocked, right? In ways that feels rigid. So you need some creative space. Then you need some reflective space to evaluate, how are you going? What are things like? Is it hitting your target? Is it hitting your core purpose? Are you feeling aligned to what you're doing? Purpose is a big one. Yes, Larissa, it truly, truly is. And I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about where some of our radar can go a little bit haywire or skewy here. And then there are some other things, okay? Some other things. Like this is not exhaustive. I could be here the whole night with you, and believe you me, you don't want me to do that, and I don't want to do that. Now, I had my frame so nicely set up. There we go. And then you've got work resources. Work resources, some of the things are going to be things like ethos, fit to the ethos of the workplace that you are. Now, if you are self-employed, then it's up to you to create that ethos. What sort of ethos do you have? Right now, I'm into a really community-based, sustainable workplace. It hit me one day at about 2013, when it occurred to me that I was my own boss, and that the work and the work environment that I was creating was really my own doing. And if I was staying back late, if I was burning the midnight oil, if I was feeling like I wasn't getting paid for what I was doing, well, that's me. I'm my own boss. So what is the work ethos, right? This stuff that we talk about, vision and the mission. And you want to actually have a clear insight into what that is. If you're not self-employed, this is another big burn factor. Can you imagine that if you, as your own in your own value-centric world, you actually believe that environmental sustainability is really important, and you were part of the Coles and Woolies production to make all those little figurines? Well, you would be really ethos misaligned every day. You'd be thinking, why are you doing this, etc. It's also got to do with productivity, how we manage our productivity in our workplace. It's got to do with our competence and skills, and if there are any gaps, and it goes on and 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 on. Okay? And each of these things have got their tanks, or their indicators, I should say, to help us to figure out. So, you have all of these things that you're measuring and you're looking at and you're keeping an eye on. And then one more thing needs to go into all of that. My board's not quite big enough, but if I did, I would say that entire engine right here, which is your car, also goes through things like weather storms, like a car does, if it's snowing, if it's blizzarding. And what I mean by that is the kind of personal and situational stresses that then come into that, right? So maybe you've got aging parents, or maybe you've got a personal crisis that comes into play, or a season of life where there's a lot of change. And what we need to do is to recognize that when those things come in, they're going to cause us a degree of anxiety or uncertainty. But whatever it is, we probably need to recalibrate. And this is where people often put too much expectations on themselves and their system by just going, I'll push through. I'll go chugga, 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 push through. The thing is, if you push through, all of these dials are going to go haywire because you're not calibrating according to the season of life or the situation that you find yourself in. Now, a lot of times it doesn't have to be that complicated, because a lot of this stuff is discipline, structure and discipline. For example, the personal resources, that's all structure and discipline. Once you get habits into place and you know what you need and you know what is required to keep your personal tanks full, then you pretty much are disciplined and structured to it. Remember I said that this, the picture of when you get out of the car, if you didn't catch this, and you actually see who's needing to push the car up the hill, and there are all these people actually behind the car pushing because the car's engine no longer is working and the driver is fatigued. That's like your family or your relationships, your personal health. Everything's kind of just compensating because this is what we need to do and this is the way we need to do it. So remembering that is structure and discipline, a lot of it. Sometimes in your different seasons, you're going to have to do things differently. Right now, I'm actually having to do my exercise very, very differently to how I used to do it. The middle part, which is your meaning and purpose, that is about constantly clarifying and figuring out, is this purpose aligned for now? Has it shifted? Has it changed? But being very, very careful not to just go for the shiny object syndrome, which is to see opportunities as things you must grab, because if you don't grab them now, you could lose out later, right? In my reading of entrepreneurs or authors or creative types, you will find that they collect ideas and possibilities and opportunities into some kind of book or notebook or somewhere. They collect it as things that are possibilities, but being very, very clear about which are the ones to actually pursue right now, because it doesn't mean that you can't pursue them later, right? And figuring out how much focus you can actually attribute to those areas, given all those other areas, everything else that is in your world that you're juggling as well. So we have finite focus, right, at the end of the day, and you've got to figure out where you need to focus. If you don't give yourself creative, reflective space to do that, then what you're focusing on really is look at my feet syndrome. Do you know what look at my feet syndrome is? Look at my feet syndrome is when you get so busy and you're stuck in just the minutiae and the details, the only vision of what you can see is the very thing that you're doing right now. Larissa, this is very poignant for me. I'm glad. Hello, Kathy. So lovely to see you. Yes, so you're only ever going to be looking down at what your feet are doing. And if your feet are just going pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, pitter patter, busy, 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 then you are essentially going to run out of steam, right? And then the third area, your work resources, is once you got those things in place, is then figuring out really how you're going to, my favorite word, operationalize. I'm all about operationalize. How are you going to operationalize it, right? How are you actually going to make what meaning has and what your engine is tanked up to do actually happen by problem solving, how to be resilient, how to be productive, how to problem solve workplace situations. Okay, so that's a little bit of what I wanted to share this evening. I don't see any questions. Do you have any questions? I might just stay here for a little bit. I'm enjoying my new setup. Actually, while you're thinking of questions, I did say that I would share with you some directions that I'm going. So part of this process for me, Kathy Atkinson, who is watching, who is her official title, Executive Assistant, she and I had some time on Friday to begin to think about what 2020 would look like. I know I said something like, if we've only got to chip away at one area, Kathy, one area consistently, because we only have finite focus, what is that area going to be? One of my thoughts as to this work is to actually really hone in on the two groups of people that are closest to my heart. So I'm not a very touchy-feely person, but I've come to realize that there are two people that I think about, or groups of people that I think about quite a lot when I'm in this space, and I'm going to be focusing more and more on that. And that's part of the reason why Studio Val, for want of a better name, has been set up this week. So stay tuned for where those directions will be, because you may very well fall into those two groups, and I'd love to take you on a journey with me. How do you focus when Larissa says, how do you focus when so many areas are great? I think that comes down to your values and priorities, Larissa. It will depend on what you think is important for you. So an exercise that is really helpful to do is to figure out what your personal values are. Some of us will have family, significant relationships, spiritual development, personal growth, achievement. So when you sort of find out what your, let's say, your top 3 or 5 values are, what is important, and of course, if you're part of a family, I was listening to a podcast today about goal-directed behavior, and it was actually talking about how families who have joint goal-directed behavior, in other words, the family comes together and you have a look and see what season of life each one is, and you figure out intrinsically what is needed for the family and the individuals in the family. When families have higher goal-directed behavior, they're less anxious and less emotionally vulnerable. So I would also say that it boils down to the collective values, figuring out what is important. So once you've got those 3 to 5 things that is really values that are very important to you, then comes the focus areas. What does that mean then in terms of what this year looks like to meet those values? What does it mean for this child? What does it mean for the family? What does it mean for how we're going to do day to day or the weekend? And once you've nutted that down, I guess that actually really shows you then what focus is left for other things. So I often say that you figure out what to say no to by first figuring out what you say yes to. What you say yes to. Does that make sense, Larissa? Hi Jill, so lovely for you to join me. Welcome to Studio Val. This is a beta test of what is to come. Love that you're continuing with your Enyo. By the way, you know I'm a fan. I'm a real fan. Just waiting to see if any other questions come my way. What are you doing? Where are you? Victoria, I think. We've got Victoria, Brisbane, and New South Wales with me at this point in time. Makes sense. Great. Yes, very good. So I'm glad that helped. Probably one last thing I would say about focus is deep focus is really, really important, and not scattered focus. So once you've figured out your main key focus area for the year, let's say for your family, for your personal self, and for in your case, Larissa, for your business. The other thing is, it's a myth to be able to multitask, right? Multitasking is possible when the tasks are low importance or low salience. In other words, I can watch TV and answer emails, or I can be listening to a podcast and cook dinner, because largely those tasks are fairly automated, fairly routine, and don't require a degree of creative problem solving or use of multiple parts of my brain. So it's really important in our week and in our days, once we've identified what are the areas that we want to work in, like that's, goal-directed behavior, that we actually allocate deep focus time to those tasks, right? Which means at least 90 minutes of saying, okay, no distractions, notifications are off, this time is being allocated to the deep focus work of this particular thing. And then being able to then go fully into that area and have not multitasking, not being distracted, and actually being fairly outcome driven for that chunk of time. I'll give you an example. In my work diary, for example, I will allocate deep focus time to what is required for content development in some of the programs that I might be doing. And that's all I'm doing, that 90 minutes. It's not always 90 minutes, but maximum of 90 minutes is devoted to just that area. Or if it's marketing, then it's marketing. Very similarly, if it's something to do with family, because I'm not so good with admin, I often have to have deep focus of, making sure the notes are signed. I know what's happening in the calendar, figuring out today, what is the day for what, right? So it's a deep focus time where that role and that space is fairly contained. Some people can do multiple focus, but most of us need deep focus. All right, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. Oh, hello. It could be Wes, or it could be Mag from Singapore is watching now. We've had a fairly international live broadcast, I could say. I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me. Feel free to watch from the beginning, and you'll get to catch me again, because this will be happening a lot more often. Okay, take care.